The air over London in the 1660s could feel like a lid clamped onto a boiling pot. Smoke from chimneys, the sour tang of the river, streets still remembering plague, then fire, then the hard work of pretending a city can be reborn without losing its mind. In that London, Isaac Newton would become the clean symbol of reason, polished by history until he looks almost unreal. But nearby, in the same century, another kind of genius kept moving through the soot and ruin. Not serene, not tidy, restless, sleepless, and sharp-edged. Robert Hooke, the man many contemporaries described as pale and lean, crooked in body, with eyes that seemed too alive for his own face. And if you want the real texture of scientific discovery, you don't start with a monument. You start with a diary that reads like a body trying to outpace itself. Keep one question in mind. What did Hooke sacrifice to keep seeing further? I'm Arthur Hale. This video uses modern AI tools to reconstruct history based on reputable records. Where data is thin, we've used educated guesses to bring the 1600s back to life. All sources are in the description. Hooke did not treat nature like a distant subject. He treated it like something he could take into his hands, and even into his veins. His diary entries are less a calm record of experiments and more a running report on a human machine that kept stalling, sputtering, and restarting. Dizziness, chest pain, insomnia, a mind that would not slow down, and a body that refused to match its speed. So he tried to hack himself. Chocolate, tea, tobacco. Not just pleasure, but tools, used for mood and pain management, tuned like knobs on a volatile instrument. When that wasn't enough, the darker pharmacy of the era waited on the shelf. Syrup of poppies, laudanum, opium in polite language. Chemical quiet, purchased at a cost he seemed willing to pay again and again. Then there was the entry that still makes modern readers pause, because it feels too close to something contemporary. Hooke experimenting with bong, cannabis, brought from the East Indies by his seafaring friend, Captain Robert Knox. In a time when even coffee could be treated as suspicious, Hooke was not only taking the drug, he was studying himself under its effects. He described it with the cold precision of someone diagnosing a malfunction, noting that it takes away understanding and memory for a time. He turned intoxication into data. He lectured on cannabis to the Royal Society, presenting his own altered mind as an object worthy of inspection. And this is where the story tightens, because the same person willing to risk his body for a clue was also the person tasked with expanding the human eye beyond its natural limits. If the city outside was full of rubble and ash, Hooke built a second London inside a lens. In 1665, he published Micrographia, a book that didn't just show people tiny things, it changed what tiny meant. Before Hooke, the small was mostly invisible, a blank space beyond ordinary perception. After Hooke, the small became crowded, engineered, unsettlingly alive. A flea could look like armor and machinery, full of strength and beauty. A needle's point could appear rugged, not sleek, like the clean geometry your imagination expects, but jagged like a landscape. It sounds obvious now, but at the time it was a new kind of shock. People were not simply learning new facts, they were discovering that their eyes had been lying to them their entire lives. And yet even that triumph wasn't simple, because seeing the invisible is not a single moment of genius. It is work. It is failure stacked on failure, then adjusted light and tried again. Hooke's microscope was not a magic portal. It was a demanding instrument that punished impatience. That punishment became public when another claim drifted across Europe like a provocation. The Dutch draper Antony van Leeuwenhoek reported seeing little animals in water. It sounded impossible, like a traveler's tale dressed up as science. The Royal Society wanted verification, and they turned to Hooke. If there was anyone who could make the invisible appear, it was the man who had already made London gasp at the anatomy of a flea. But the attempt to confirm Leeuwenhoek became a kind of humiliation. Hooke stared into lenses and saw nothing. Not wonder, not monsters, just the same dead-looking world, stubbornly refusing to produce a miracle on schedule. So he constructed the conditions for life to reveal itself. He steeped black pepper in river water and waited for decay to do its work. Days passed. Light shifted at the window. Water evaporated. The tiniest variables turned the experiment into a moving target. And here's the detail that matters. Hooke's eventual success was not just a discovery. It was a demonstration that observation itself is a process, You don't simply look and receive truth. You build the situation that lets truth show up. In November 1677, after days of steeping, the scene finally changed. Hooke described seeing infinite small living creatures swimming and playing, a kind of sea contained inside a glass tube. Suddenly the world was not divided into living and non-living in the neat way people preferred. Life could bloom in the murk of pepper and water, invisible until the lens and the method and the patience aligned. It was the sort of revelation that could thrill a king. Hooke turned these sights into a spectacle of knowledge for Charles II, proof that the universe did not end where human senses gave up. But Hooke was never only the man at a microscope. By day, he carried another role that made him a hinge between catastrophe and rebuilding. After the Great Fire of 1666, London needed measuring, plotting, and design. Hooke became surveyor of the city, walking streets still raw from disaster, helping raise the city again from its charred outline. And here the story takes on its darker irony. Among his architectural works, his most infamous design was the new Bethlehem Hospital, Bedlam. Hooke designed it not as a bare cage, but as a palace, a magnificent facade, 540 feet long, in a French chateau style, ornate and imposing. Contemporary wits joked that England housed its lunatics in buildings better than the French built for their kings. Think about that for a moment. A man often described as melancholy, mistrustful, jealous, a man who spent nights dosing himself to quiet his own mind, drew up plans for a grand monument to madness, a palace for the insane, erected in the city he was helping to rebuild into something orderly. And still, even that wasn't enough for the shape of his ambition. From his school days at Westminster, Hooke had been obsessed with flight, inventing 30 several ways of flying. It wasn't only a boyish dream, it was a persistent refusal to accept gravity as the final word. Later, he told the Royal Society about an artificial muscle he believed could command the strength of 20 men. A mechanical fantasy, part engineering, part wish, that the body could be upgraded, reinforced, made to do what nature would not allow. If Newton's genius would be remembered as celestial, Hooke's was stubbornly physical. He wanted gears under skin. He wanted levers inside muscle. He wanted the world to confess its mechanisms. And when you live like that, you don't just collect discoveries, you collect enemies. In the comments, name one invention that feels like it came from obsession, not comfort. Hooke's bitterest conflict was with the man history crowned. In 1679, Hooke wrote to Newton with an idea about planetary motion, suggesting that it could be explained by a force reciprocal to the square of the distance from the center, the inverse square relationship. It was the kind of suggestion that can be everything in science, or nothing, depending on who gets to frame it, who gets to publish it, and who gets believed. When Newton later released the Principia, the towering text that would define modern physics, Hooke believed his contribution had been swallowed whole. He demanded acknowledgement. Newton refused. This was not a polite disagreement with footnotes. It became a shadow war, fought in letters and reputations, powered by pride and the ruthless understanding that history is written by whoever controls the story. And then comes the strangest, most haunting detail of all. Today there is no authenticated portrait of Robert Hooke. The absence feels like a deliberate silence. It is widely rumored that when Newton became president of the Royal Society, he had Hooke's portrait destroyed. Rumor is not proof, but the result is real enough. We can trace laws of motion with Newton's name attached, but we cannot look into Hooke's face with certainty. We are left with descriptions instead. Skin and bone, a sharp ingenious look, hair hanging neglected over his face. A man turning into a ghost while still alive. That erasure fits the pattern of Hooke's life, because even his body seemed to be fading under the pressure he put on it. In his later years, accounts describe him dying, emaciated, blind, bitter, his legs swollen, his chest pained, surrounded by a clutter of his own inventions, as if the machines he made could not save the machine he was. And yet, if London in that era had an unofficial nervous system, Hooke moved through it like a signal. He rushed between coffee houses like Garraway's and Jonathan's, where conversation could shift from philosophy to business to the stock market without warning. He dissected a porpoise in public. He debated the nature of the soul in rooms stained with coffee rings. He lived like an entire institution compressed into one restless person, an internet of the 17th century made of legs and ink and sleepless nights. This is the piece that doesn't fit the clean version of scientific progress. Discovery isn't always a straight line of enlightened eureka moments. Sometimes it is a messy, drug-fueled scramble through the dark, a person trying to keep up with the questions they can't stop asking. Hooke's curiosity gave the world new sight, new instruments, new ways of building after destruction. It also consumed him, turning his body into a test site, his mind into a furnace, his reputation into a battleground. And maybe that is why his story still matters. Because the dark side of curiosity is not only that it can reveal unsettling truths, it's that it can convince a person that the next lens, the next dose, the next sleepless night will finally make everything add up. Hooke kept pulling back the skin of reality to see the gears underneath, even when the gears cut him back. In the end, London kept his buildings, science kept his methods, Newton kept the clean narrative. But Hooke remains in the spaces between, the place where progress looks less like marble and more like smoke, ink, and a man bending over a tube of pepper water, refusing to stop until something living appears. If this story changed how you see genius, consider subscribing for more untold histories.